My glasses are supposed to be anti-glare. Clearly, that is not the case. I would wear my glasses in my videos, but then this happens, and I just have boxes on my eyeballs. Are you currently breathing air? Then you need to read these books. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be telling you the books that you need to read if you breathe oxygen. If you are alive, you need to read these books. These are the top 5 books that I think everyone is required to read in their lifetime, and I thought about this idea when I was answering some questions for my Q&A that I just uploaded, and someone asked me, what is one book that you think everyone should read? And when I thought about this, I thought that would be such a great video idea, and I could not only share one book that I think everyone should read, but a selection of books that I think everyone should read. These books talk about life in general, existence, aspects of humanity that we all go through, and books that have brought me a lot of comfort in a lot of different areas of my life, and I think that they would really be beneficial for everyone to read. And so if you breathe oxygen, I really do truly believe that you need to read these 5 books, at least one of these 5 books. And I did break them down into some categories so that it's kind of a nice wide range of different types of books that I think everyone should read. And I'm so excited to share this little list with you guys. It was quite hard to break it down to just 5 books or 5 categories, but I'm really happy with it, and I think that there's kind of a book for everybody here. And anyway, so let's start talking about these 5 books. The first category is a poetry collection. So this could be a poetry collection of your choice. I just think everyone in their lifetime should try their hardest to find a poetry collection that really speaks to them. I'm going to be sharing some poets that speak to me that I love, but you guys, I highly recommend reading from these 3 poets. I love a lot of poetry that talks about life and talks about nature and humanity's connection to nature. So these 3 poets do cater to the connection between humanity and nature, but of course we have so many different types of poetry, but these 3 are my favorites. The first one is Robert Frost. This is an Everyman's Library Pocket Poet Edition, and I love these. I have quite a few of them. It's a wonderful selection of poetry from him. So if you want to read some Robert Frost and want a specific collection, you don't know which collection to go for, I would really highly recommend the Everyman's edition. And I will just read you one of my favorite poems. It's, I think, the most iconic Robert Frost poem, but for good reason, because it is just so beautiful. And the way that he talks about humanity and life and man's connection to nature, and also sometimes his poems can be quite sorrowful because he did lead a very, I think, melancholic life. I did study him when I was taking poetry classes in university, so I'm not sure how else to express it besides that I do think he was quite a sad person. Anyway, okay, so the poem is of course The Road Not Taken. 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, and where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because was grassy and wanted wear, though as for the passing there, had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how ways lead on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I studied this poem in university. I loved studying this poem. I could go on and on about it in general, but I love the concept of you have 2 roads, and you have one that a lot of people have gone down, and you have one that not as many people have gone down, and you took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And I feel like that has always kind of been my subconscious view on my career and the life that I have wanted to lead, is I've just wanted to kind of go down my own path and sort of figure it out as I go, and I think that's truly a beautiful thing. Just the way that it's written, it's so beautiful. I love the imagery, and I love Robert Frost, so I had to shout him out. And then the next poet is my man, Walt Whitman. I love Walt Whitman. He's probably my all-time favorite poet, and this is a gorgeous collection that I actually got at his birthplace, and it is the Leaves of Grass Deathbed Edition. And this is one of the biggest collections I've been able to find from him, and I do think it has almost all of his poetry, if not all of his poetry in it. I think there might be some poems that aren't in here. He also has incredibly beautiful poems about love and man's connection to man, as well as man's connection to nature and just life in general, and leading a very strong life. And just his poems are so impactful, and one of my favorites is another one that is extremely popular, and that is O Me, O Life. O me, O life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless? Of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the objects mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all, of the plodding and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of the rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, O me, so sad recurring, what good amid these, O me, O life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. That is one of my all-time favorite Walt Whitman poems, and it's just, I read that and I feel so encouraged, and he's talking about, I think my favorite aspect of that poem is saying that we are all here to contribute a verse. We have a purpose here, we have something to say, and it should be something worth saying, and I just love it. All of his poems are incredible, so if you haven't read much of Walt Whitman, I highly recommend looking into some of his poetry. What's great about poetry is you can even just, I love going on Pinterest and looking at poems, so typing in a certain author's name and just seeing the different poems that other people have pinned, as well as just looking online, so you don't have to necessarily go out and buy a collection if you aren't sure about a certain poet, but I highly recommend Walt Whitman. And then the last poet that I want to talk about is my favorite poetess, and that is Mary Oliver. This is her collection called Devotions, and this is a bigger collection of her smaller collections. So if you want to try Mary Oliver, I highly recommend getting this specific book. And the poem in here that I wanted to share is titled I Worried. And again, like Robert Frost and Walt Whitman, Mary Oliver talks a lot about the connection that men and women have to nature, as well as everyday life and just the beauty of the natural world. I read her poetry and I just feel so lucky to be alive and so lucky to be in the world that we have. I feel like she really makes you appreciate the world and everything that it has to offer us, and maybe the things that we take for granted. So the poem that I want to read out to you guys is titled I Worried. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and gave it up, and took my old body, and went out into the morning, and sang. I love that so much because I am such a worrier. I worry all the time. I am just always overthinking, and what I love about that poem is that it's showing that all that worrying can lead to, it doesn't lead to anything, and it can lead to you just driving yourself mad. And I love the end when she says that I gave up, I took my old body and out into the world and I sang, even if she couldn't sing. I love that because I can't sing. I have a horrible singing voice and I always worry, and just reading that poem brought me so much comfort, and I think that's the best thing about poetry, is being able to find a poem that really just you can connect with and brings you comfort. And for me, Mary Oliver brings me so much comfort, so I highly recommend checking out Mary Oliver and Walt Whitman and Robert Frost. But again, this part of the video, this category, number 5, about finding a poem or a poetry collection or a poet that speaks to you, is really just always, I guess, like a goal for yourself to set, is maybe look into some poetry. I think that it could do nothing but bring comfort and joy into your life to be able to find a poet that really just you feel so connected to. And I think if you breathe air, you should really try reading some poetry. It can do nothing but good. The next book that I think, if you breathe air, you need to read is a nonfiction collection of letters, and that is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. This collection of letters, when I read it, brought me an insane amount of enlightenment and comfort and joy and passion and encouragement, and this is, I truly think, one of those books that everyone needs to read. This collection of letters, I feel like Rilke subconsciously wrote it for the every person, and even though these are letters that he wrote to an aspiring young poet, I really feel like he wrote it for everyone. So the back of this collection says it very beautifully. This is also the Penguin Little Black Classics. This is number 103. The back says, "The poet Rilke's lyrical and life-changing advice to an aspiring young writer is among the most inspiring expressions of youthful creativity there has ever been." And if you guys don't know, you might know, I am in the process of writing a book, my own book, my first book, and I am taking in all of the advice on writing, and I'm looking into my favorite writers and the advice that they give to aspiring writers, and that is what Rilke is really doing here for this young poet. I've been reading it a little bit now, just because I'm looking for that encouragement for my own writing, and there's this one section, it's literally on the 4th page, and I think it's incredibly beautiful. And if you are an aspiring writer, or you like writing, or even if you just want some, like it said on the back, just some life-changing advice, not even if you are an aspiring writer, but just in general, I feel like Rilke just brings so much comfort and clarity on life in this collection of letters. So anyway, I will read you page 4. "You ask whether your verses are good. You ask me that. You have asked others before. You send them to magazines, you compare them with other poems, and you worry when certain editors turn your efforts down. Now, since you have allowed me to offer you advice, let me ask you to give up all that. You are looking to the outside, and that, above all, you should not be doing. Nobody can advise you and help you, nobody. There is only one way. Go into yourself. Examine the reason that bids you to write. Check whether it reaches its roots into the deepest region of your heart. Admit to yourself whether you would die if it should be denied you to write. This above all, ask yourself in your night's quietest hour, must I write? Dig down into yourself for a deep answer, and if it should be affirmative, if it is given to you to respond to this serious question with a loud and simple I must, then construct your life according to this necessity. Your life right into its most inconsequential and slightest hour must become a sign and witness of this urge. Then approach nature. Then try, like the first human being, to say what you see and experience and love and lose." And it keeps going on, but oh my god, when I read that, I read it a few years ago, and then I've been rereading it, and when I reread that, it just kind of blew my mind, because I think as an artist, you're always relying on critique, other people's critique and other people's view on your art and how other people perceive your art, and when he said, just look into yourself, dig down deep, especially with writing, ask yourself, must you write? But the way that he said that, and just, oh my god, it kind of blew my mind in a way. Not in a way, in a huge way. His other advice, not only about writing, is absolutely incredible. This other passage on page 33 is another one of my favorites. It says, "We know little, but that we must hold fast to what is difficult is the certainty that will never forsake us. It is good to be alone, for solitude is difficult. That something is difficult should be one more reason to do it. To love is good, for love is hard. Love between one person and another, that is perhaps the hardest thing it is laid on us to do, the utmost, the ultimate trial and test, the work for which all other work is just preparation. For this reason, young people who are beginners in everything do not yet know how to love. They must learn. With their whole being, with all their strength, concerted on their solitary, fearful, upward beating hearts, they have to learn to love." Oh god, just this book is incredible, and I highly recommend you read it if you are currently breathing oxygen while watching this video. It is so impactful and inspiring, and just, if you need a hug, I feel like this book is a hug. It's like the embodiment of a hug. The next category is literary fiction that will soothe the soul and make you feel every emotion that you are capable of feeling and every emotion you didn't know you were capable of feeling. And these two books are from my very favorite author. I talk about him all the time. You guys are not going to be surprised if you are familiar with my videos. And that is Fredrik Backman. So the first book is his novel A Man Called Uwe, which I adore with every fiber of my being. If you are new to Fredrik Backman's work, I highly recommend starting with A Man Called Uwe. I will read you the back because if I try to describe it on my own, we will be here for forever. So it says, "At first sight, Uwe is almost certainly the grumpiest man you will ever meet. A curmudgeon with staunch principles, strict routines, and a short fuse. People think him bitter, and he thinks himself surrounded by idiots." Uwe's well-ordered, solitary world gets a shake-up one November morning with the appearance of new neighbors, a chatty young couple, and their two boisterous daughters, who announce their arrival by accidentally flattening Uwe's mailbox with their U-Haul. What follows is a heartwarming tale of unkempt cats, unlikely friendships, and a community's unexpected reassessment of the one person they thought they all had figured out. I think this book has some of the best character development because in the beginning of the story we have Uwe, who is very sad after the loss of his wife, and he just kind of wants everything to end, and he thinks everyone around him is an idiot, and eventually that changes, and it's about found family, and it's about the beauty of life. And the more time that goes by, I always talk about Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I do love Beartown and the Beartown series, but the more time that goes by, I feel like A Man Called Uwe is really my favorite of Fredrik Backman's works, just because it encapsulates everything that I love and every emotion that you can feel, and it's so funny and lighthearted but also so incredibly devastating, and it's just everything that you could want in a book. It will make you feel every emotion, it will bring you so much comfort, and again, this book is kind of like a nice warm hug. But also, there is a new movie coming out. There is a Swedish adaptation which I love very much, but there's also a new US adaptation coming out with Tom Hanks starring as the character of Uwe, or it's the American version is A Man Called Otto, and I can't wait to watch it. I'm so excited. So a perfect time to read the book before you see the movie. So highly recommend this book. I really do feel like this is a book that everyone needs to read. So this is the first page to A Man Called Uwe. It is titled, A Man Called Uwe Buys a Computer That Is Not a Computer. Uwe is 59. He drives a Saab. He's the kind of man who points at people he doesn't like the look of as if they were burglars and his forefinger a policeman's flashlight. He stands at the counter of a shop where owners of Japanese cars come to purchase white cables. Uwe eyes the sales assistant for a long time before shaking a medium-sized white box at him. "So this is one of those O-pads, is it?" he demands. The assistant, a young man with a single-digit body mass index, looks ill at ease. He visibly struggles to control his urge to snatch the box out of Uwe's hands. "Yes, exactly, an iPad. Do you think you should stop shaking it like that?" Uwe gives the box a skeptical glance as if it's a hidden, dubious sort of box, a box that rides a scooter and wears tracksuit pants and just called Uwe my friend before offering to sell him a watch. "I see. So it's a computer, yes?" The sales assistant nods, then hesitates and quickly shakes his head. "Yes, or what I mean is, it's an iPad. Some people call it a tablet, and others call it a surfacing device. There are different ways of looking at it." Uwe looks at the sales assistant as if he had just spoken backwards before shaking the box again. "But is it good, this thing?" The assistant nods confusedly. "Yes, or how do you mean?" Uwe sighs and starts talking slowly, articulating his words as if the only problem here is his adversary's impaired hearing. "Is it good? Is it a good computer?" The assistant scratches his chin. "I mean, yeah, it's really good, but it depends what sort of computer you want." Uwe glares at him. "I want a computer! A normal bloody computer!" Silence descends over the two men for a short while. The assistant clears his throat. "Well, it isn't really a normal computer. Maybe you'd rather have a..." The assistant stops and seems to be looking for a word that falls within the bounds of comprehension of the man facing him. Then he clears his throat again and says, "A laptop?" Uwe shakes his head wildly and leans menacingly over the counter. No, I don't want a laptop. I want a computer. I just love it. I think that he's so lovably grumpy, and his character development is really my favorite part, as well as just this book captures so much of life and humanity and love and friendship and family, and it's beautiful. The next book I will talk about briefly just because I have talked about this book quite a lot on my channel, and that is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer, also by Fredrik Backman. This is about a grandfather losing his memory, and it's also about how it's affecting his son and his grandson. And the themes that are discussed in this book as well, just about life in general and growing older. This book is just so beautiful, and it's one of my favorites. It's a novella. It will take you no time to read, and it's beautifully written. Fredrik Backman's amazing. I really feel like this is one of his best pieces, and I don't think a lot of people really know about it or talk about it, so I am here to talk about it. The next category is philosophy. I haven't read a ton of philosophy. I did read this book towards the end of 2022, and I would love to read more philosophy in 2023 because I loved this book, and I feel like philosophy is a genre that I really think could be explored greatly and have a really big impact on your life. And the book that I read and that I loved was Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This is Marcus Aurelius's journal that was never meant to be published, so it's another one of those books, kind of like Letters to a Young Poet, where it's just talking about life and different aspects of humanity and just existence. And like Letters to a Young Poet, I don't know if Rilke ever intended for his letters to be published. I highly doubt it, as well as Marcus Aurelius never intended for his journal to be published. So I think we get a really intimate portrayal into a person's thoughts and ideas and the way that they felt about different aspects of life. And I think that that makes it all the more authentic, and I think it perfectly shows us how us as humans, over all these years that have passed since Marcus Aurelius actually wrote in his journal, wrote these quotes and books, that we haven't really changed very much, and the things that we are concerned over, have been concerned over for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so Meditations is incredibly inspiring and comforting, and again, another one of those books that I feel like could really just benefit your life from having read. I just opened up to a random page, and I love this one. I have it highlighted and the page folded down so that I could remember that I loved it. It is in book 6, and it says, "Reflect on how many separate events, both bodily and mentally, are taking place in each one of us in the same tiny fragment of time. And then you will not be surprised if many more events, indeed all that comes to pass, subsist together in the one and the whole, which we call the universe." I just really feel like it's so reflective, and you can read this and really get a new perspective, a different perspective, kind of broaden your mind and really appreciate everything that we humans have inside of us and that we're capable of. One of my favorite things that Marcus Aurelius writes about is to be present. He always talks about being in the present moment, and I love when he writes about that. Again, in book 6 it says, "He who sees the present has seen all things, both all that has come to pass from everlasting and all that will be for eternity. All things are related and the same." I just love it. I just love it so much. So I highly recommend giving Marcus Aurelius a try, or maybe just looking into reading some more philosophy, because that is one of my goals for 2023. So like I mentioned earlier, when that person asked me for my Q&A, what one book do I think everyone on the planet needs to read? This one book came to mind. I've been talking about it quite a lot on my channel recently. It is just one of the most inspiring books I've ever read for my own writing, because like I said, I am in the process of writing my own book, and so I've been going back to my favorite books and trying to look at them not only as a reader but as a writer and figure out how they work and how they are done and how they tick and move and the mechanics of the stories. And so I have been returning quite often to this book, and this is a book that I think everyone on the face of the earth needs to read. It is my all-time favorite classic. It's my all-time favorite book, and that is The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. So this category is a children's classic. This is dubbed the children's classic for adults. I did not come up with that. That is a true thing that people say about this book. This is one of the most widely read classics ever. I just adore everything about this book. It is told kind of like a fable about this aviator who crash lands in the desert and eventually finds or meets the little prince, which has traveled from another planet, asteroid B612, to Earth, and through meeting the little prince, the aviator learns about the little prince's journey as well as the people that the little prince has met, and it's really just about different aspects of life, different aspects of being human, also with an outside perspective, because the little prince isn't necessarily human. He is human, but he's different, and it's hard to explain, but it is one of the most impactful books I've ever read. Probably the most life-changing book, to be completely honest, and a book that I think everyone, absolutely everyone, needs to read. And I wish that I could just recite this whole book to you. What should I read to you? Okay, this is one of my favorite parts of the book. It is kind of towards the end. It's not really a spoiler. Okay, so this is about the little prince telling the aviator when he met the fox. Now, the fox can speak, and the fox is very wise, and it's also about the little prince who fell in love with a rose on his planet. On his planet, a rose bloomed, and he fell in love with this rose. The rose could also speak, and it is personified, but the rose is very vain, and they fell in love, but he left the rose and came to Earth. And basically, he found out when he went down to Earth that his rose was not the only rose, and that there are gardens and gardens of other roses, and so his rose is not as special as he thought that his rose was. And in this part, he goes to look at all the other roses on Earth, which made him realize that his rose was not the only rose. The little prince went to look at the roses again. "You're not at all like my rose. You're nothing at all yet," he told them. "No one has tamed you, and you haven't tamed anyone. You're the way my fox was. He was just a fox like 100,000 others, but I've made him my friend, and now he's the only fox in all the world." And the roses were humbled. "You're lovely, but you're empty," he went on. "One couldn't die for you. Of course an ordinary passerby would think my rose looked just like you, but my rose, all on her own, is more important than all of you together, since she's the one I've watered, since she's the one I've put under glass, since she's the one I sheltered behind a screen, since she's the one for whom I killed the caterpillars, except the 2 or 3 for butterflies, since she's the one I listened to when she complained, or when she boasted, or even sometimes when she said nothing at all, since she's my rose." So in the beginning, his rose is vain, and so they misunderstand each other, and through their misunderstanding, he just leaves. And then he sees these other roses, and he thinks she's like any other rose. And then he meets the fox, and the fox gives him a secret, and this secret reveals to him that it's the time that he spent on his rose that makes his rose so important. That is just one of the many groundbreaking and inspiring and beautiful parts of this book. I just want to encourage absolutely everyone on the face of this planet and other planets, or asteroids, like asteroid B612, which the little prince is standing on, to read this book, because it is one of the most impactful, incredible, amazing books I've ever read, and my absolute favorite. So please, please, please do yourself a favor and read The Little Prince, especially if you are breathing air currently. If you breathe air, you need to read this book. So those are the 5 categories and the many books that I think everyone is required to read in their lifetime, and I would love to know if you agree or if you think other books should go in this list. So let me know in a comment what your top 5 or top 3 or 1 required read is. I would love to know. I would also love to know if you end up reading any of these books, what you think of them. So if you go and read these books in the future, then please feel free to come back to this video and leave a comment. Even if it's months from now, I would love to know what you think of these books, and I hope that this video was inspiring in some way, inspired you to pick up one of these books, or maybe to pick up some poetry, some philosophy, some Frederick Bachman, some children's literature, particularly The Little Prince. And I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Happy reading.